Okay, thank you all and welcome back to the final session of today's International Solidarity Conference. It is my very, very great pleasure to welcome into our final session Ziauddin Yousafzai, teacher, father of Malala and co-founder of the Malala Fund, who's going to be speaking with the union's junior vice president, Louise Atkinson, in conversation now. So you are so welcome to join us. And I'm going to hand over to Louise now, who will introduce the session. Louise.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Colleagues, good afternoon. I am Louise Atkinson, and as Gwen said, I am your Junior Vice President. And it's my absolute pleasure this afternoon to welcome you to this very special session with our very distinguished guest, Ziauddin Yousafzai. Ziauddin is co-founder and board member of Malala Fund and Malala's father. For many years, Ziauddin served as a teacher and a school administrator in his home country of Pakistan. When the Taliban invaded their home in Swat Valley, Ziauddin peacefully resisted their efforts to limit personal freedoms. Speaking out in this way put Ziauddin at risk, but he feared remaining silent would be far worse. And inspired by her father's example, Malala began to campaign publicly for girls to go to school. In October 2009, the New York Times filmed a short documentary about Ziauddin and Malala's fight to protect girls' education in Swat. Due to her increased prominence, Malala was shot in the head by the Taliban 2 years later. Malala survived and was transported to the United Kingdom for treatment. And Ziauddin, along with his wife, Turpakai, and their 2 sons, joined Malala in Birmingham. Determined to continue their campaign, Ziauddin and Malala founded Malala Fund in 2013, and they champion every girl's right to 12 years free, safe, quality education. I have a few questions for Ziauddin this afternoon, but if we have time, we may be able to take some questions from the floor, 1 or 2. So if delegates, if you have any questions, you would like to pop them into the Q&A, we may get a chance to ask them towards the end of our session. So, Ziauddin, on behalf of the whole of the NEU, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you as our very special guest to this In Conversation session at International Solidarity Conference 2021. It's fabulous to have you here. So, Ziauddin, your commitment to human rights and education is both well known and admirable. Could you take us back to the origins of that commitment and share some of your story with us? I'm really interested to hear where your convictions come from.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who is there on this NEU, and I'm in solidarity with you in this International Solidarity Conference. And thank you to Louise for this beautiful introduction, mentioning about me. And I'm always feel so proud to be called as Malala's father as well. Thank you to Sam for translating me in the sign language. Thank you to everyone who is there. And it's a great pleasure and honor to be with you and to be speaking with you. I'm coming to your questions that about my commitments, why I was committed to education, why I was committed, and I am committed to education and to equality and to human rights. And if I tell my story, you will understand the background that where it comes from. Basically, I was grown up in a small village in the northwest of Pakistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And I grew up with 5 sisters and a brother. And growing up as a child and then as a teenager, excuse me, I could see that I was special for my family and for the community because I was a boy. I could see that I was given sumptuous part of the chicken when the food was made. I was given a more pair of shoes. I was served with better clothes as compared to my sisters. and my opinions and my views were valued because I was a boy. And the worst discrimination that my sisters went through was their deprivation from education. I was sent to school, but none of my 5 sisters had an opportunity to go to school. And I won't blame my parents for that only because like society was patriarchal, so the government was also patriarchal. And many governments are still very patriarchal in many ways. So there were quite enough school for the boys, but there was hardly any school for the girls. And that was the reason that my sisters did not go to school. And for my parents, like, they wanted to make everything from this one boy. They wanted to see me as an influential person, a doctor, a very well-known member of this community to contribute to the family and community. But for my 5 sisters, their only dream was to get them married as early as possible. So that was the reason that as a child, really, I did not know about that discrimination. I did not realize that it was unjust and unfair. Rather, as a very child, I might have enjoyed being favored as a boy because of my gender. But this was education that changed me, that transformed me into a new person, that later on, I felt guilty being favored for being a boy. So that is the background that made me committed and to human rights and to education. And I believe that quality education is closely interlinked with human rights, because quality education tells us how to respect the rights of other people rather than enjoying to be special for your gender or for your ethnicity or for your faith. If you are educated, then you feel guilty. Why should they be like that? So that is the background that I am committed, and I was very committed to education because I believe that my 5 sisters did not go to school. So they did not achieve in their life. They could not dream beyond becoming wives and mothers, and now they are grandmothers. And I could do all those things which I could in my life because of education. So that was why that I believed in education, and I believe that education is a gateway to human rights as well.
Wow, that's so interesting to hear you talk about that. Like, education for me is so important, and it's really tough working in the education sector in the UK at the moment, as I'm sure it is around the world as well. But it is that real key to change in the future, and it's lovely to hear you talk about it being linked to human rights as well. And I know what it's like to grow up in a small village with a number of brothers and sisters as well, living in North Cumbria in England. So, Ziauddin, you taught and opened schools in Swat at a time when the Taliban were attacking schools and targeting education, particularly girls' education. So what motivated you at that time to take those risks and to stand up for education and to stand up for gender equality?
Yeah, like, you know a little bit about the background, which I told you, that I came from a family where girls' education was not there in our history. Like, not only my family, but many other families as well. And after getting my education, I was very lucky, and I'm so grateful to my father, though he didn't do it for his daughters, but he did it for me because they changed me. And my father was a clerk in the mosque. He was a Maulana. He was like a Muslim priest. He was not supposed to send me to a modern education school. He was supposed to send me to a madrasa for theology, for theology. But he did not bind me to his past. He did not shackle me to his past. He was a father of future. And I remember he was so inspirational because he was my teacher in school, theology teacher in school as well. And he always told me, Ziauddin, this world is like an open book, read it. So the indigenous knowledge he wanted to impart to me, that was amazing. So my father empowered me with knowledge and education, and that changed me. That transformed me into the kind of person that I am. It changed my inner being. It changed me, it changed my inner being, beautiful, just, fair. And education gave me values, the value of equality, the value of justice, the value of tolerance, the value of respecting the otherness of other people, and the value of empathy. So that was the reason that I thought that my 5 sisters, they could not achieve education. Also, on my wife's side, there were 5 sisters and they didn't go to school. So I was very determined that if I'm a father, I will send my daughter to school. And I will be, and I was very keen and I was very determined to educate my daughter. And you see, when you have all these big dreams, a father's dream for a daughter, and all those dreams come through education. Like when you want to see your daughter different from your sisters, different from your mother, different from the ancestors, and you see that she should be a different girl, a girl known by her own name, then you say, oh, education is the way to achieve that. And at that time, when she's in school and she was in grade 3 or 4, we had an amazing life in the Swat Valley. Swat, at that time, I mean, it's still very good, but before Taliban, it was a place of tourism. The queen, I mean, here, we are in the UK now, Queen called it Switzerland of the East. So that beautiful valley was turned into a place of terrorism by Taliban. And they banned girls' education. They destroyed more than 400 schools. They stopped women and girls to be going to the marketplaces. And they inflicted inhuman atrocities on the people of Swat. They hanged people upside down in the squares. So at that time, when the right of education was deprived, we were deprived from the right of education. You think of a father whose all hopes are about education. At that time, I mean, my daughter inspired me. My daughter inspired me. Her education inspired me. And when Taliban banned girls' education, more than 50,000 girls in Swat Valley were deprived from education. And I had this empathy, like my daughter, I was feeling for the daughters of the whole valley. And that was the time that I was a teacher, but I had to become a fighter for the right of education. Malala was a student, but she had to become a campaigner for the right of education. And it happened in our family. Family is very important. I tell people that family is the first institution where we impart great values in our children. So as an English saying goes, like father, like son, but in our family is what it was, like father, like daughter. So Malala being inspired by my activism, I think she also wrote the BBC blog, and then she was on every media, local media, international media, to raise her voice for the right of education. And that's how we fought for the right of education. And believe me, it was worth it. You said it was a high risk, but when you imagine that, I mean, your daughter is going to school and there are more than 50,000 girls who are going to school. And in a few weeks and months, you know that there are some bad guys. Those bad guys now, again, they are going to occupy Afghanistan, and they are there again. And those bad guys, they are coming to Swat and they say, no education, no girls' education. At that time, I mean, one life like Ziauddin's life becomes very small in comparison to that big cause of the right of education for hundreds and thousands of girls.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing that, you know, like you say, like father, like son, like father, like daughter. Yeah, I'm experiencing at the moment, Ziauddin, my daughter is following in my footsteps, which is presenting some of its own issues at the moment, because she is very much a mother's daughter, very forthright and outspoken is my daughter at the moment. But so you did take some massive risks, and it is amazing to hear you talk about, you know, that your risks were insignificant compared to what was going on at the time in the area. How I'm just interested, how did your community react to yourself and Malala's kind of activism around the time?
This is a very interesting question, because I mean, I as an activist had to fight against two things. One was patriarchy. You know, patriarchy is a system which is very conducive to Talibanization. Because in patriarchy, Taliban find a very fertile land for their Talibanization. And what is Talibanization? For me, Talibanization is the negation of women's visibility and empowerment, in simple words. So basically, at that time, when Taliban banned girls' education, I want, if you repeat your question, I'll appreciate. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Ziauddin, just get myself off of mute there. I'm concerned about my pets in the background disturbing us. So
like the last part of the question you asked.
Just asking how your community reacted to.
Yes,
You know,
so there were two things. There were patriarchy as well. I remember that I named Malala after the famous Pashtun Afghan heroine, Malala Fund. And Malala Fund, she was a legendary girl who fought in the Second Anglo-Afghan War, and she became very famous. So I had great romance for that name, because Malala of Afghanistan was known by her own name. So I remember that when I took my mother to the doctor, so the doctor wrote in prescription, mother of Ziauddin. And if my father took her, she became wife of Ruhul Amin. It's my father's name. So I named her after the Malala Fund. And then when I entered her name in the family tree, so my cousin had brought that family tree, and he was sitting in front of me. And when I just drew a line from my name and wrote Malala, he had this grimace on his face, that what this crazy man is doing. He is entering a girl name on a family tree, because that family tree was tracing back to some like 400 years. And that was the first name on the family tree, a female name. So then when Malala became like a popular and well-known and visible girl in the community, one of my nephews told my wife, because he couldn't tell me directly, he told my wife that, oh, we now hear bad things in the community, and the community people, they don't like Malala's visibility in the public places, like on media, on television, and mixing with men and boys. And I told my wife that tell him that he should not poke his nose in family affairs. He should stay away. So many people were there. They did not like my behavior. They changed, that social change in my behavior. But I was convinced that what I was doing was right. And that's why I tell people that when you stand for a social change, the first person you come across is you, because there is an old Ziauddin. I grew up in patriarchy. So I had all these problems in the beginning, but I unlearned all those stupid things which had been taught to us for centuries. So of course you are right, there was a pressure from the community, but once you are convinced yourself that you are on the right path, then you go. Then you go. It's difficult in the beginning to swim against the tide, against the flow. But once you learn how to swim against the tide, even a time comes, then you turn the tide and the tide goes in your direction where you swim. So this is how that the people who opposed me in the beginning, because of the patriarchy, they supported Malala and myself. And now they are the biggest supporters of our cause for education.
That is really fabulous to hear. I mean, your conviction in what you've been fighting for is absolutely awe-inspiring and amazing. Our delegates here will be very familiar, I'm sure, with Malala's story, but they may not know much about her current work. So can you share a bit of an overview of Malala Fund's work currently?
Yeah, of course. So you know about the story that, I mean, even when Malala was in Pakistan, before attack on her, when she was nominated for the International Children Peace Prize, then the Prime Minister of Pakistan gave her the first Malala Yousafzai Youth Peace Prize. And she became a big name for education in Pakistan. Even at that time, she had an assembly of her school peers and school classmates. And she had founded Malala Foundation in the Swat, and she wrote its objectives. But in October, 2012, 9 October, she was attacked by Taliban because this one girl with a voice and with a book, I mean, they are scared of education. Why I believe in education? One of the reasons is that as I know the importance of education, Taliban also knows the importance of it, because they are against education, because they know that they don't want to see a girl empowered. And they know that when a girl is educated, she becomes herself, then she is empowered. And they had a woman to be empowered. So that was the background, that when Malala was attacked, so the girl who was speaking for 50,000 girls in the Swat Valley, after the attack, the same girl, Malala, and I myself, we co-founded the Malala Fund. And now she is speaking for 130 million girls all around the world who are deprived from education. And we were basically local activists. So we believe in the local activists for education, local advocates of education. And we have this Malala Fund champion network all over the world, especially in 8 countries like in Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, for the Syrian refugees in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. And we have champions in Brazil. We have champion in Ethiopia. So in some 8 and more than 8 countries, we are working. And we are working with the Malala Fund champions, who are basically champions in their own way for the cause of girls' education in their own countries, but we are supporting them because we know that they are the right people to fight against the practices and policies that stop girls from education. So we have a huge investment in these countries in advocacy. And I'm so glad that girls' education has become very prominent after Malala Fund's activism. And we dream that one day we see all girls all over the world in school receiving safe, quality, and free education.
It's so interesting to hear you speaking about local activists being sort of supported and with the solidarity that Malala's Fund offers as well. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the key challenges that are facing girls' education and what the international community could possibly do to help?
Yeah, of course. You see, there are 130 million girls who were not in school before the COVID-19 pandemic. And these 130 million girls are not in school, and they were not in school because of the gap in investment like financial problems, also because of the social taboos. And the third reason is the quality of education, because there are girls, parents who don't send their girls to school because they don't think that if they go to this particular school, they will learn anything, because of the scarcity of teachers, because of the deficiency of the basic infrastructure. So there were three big reasons that girls are not in school, 130 million girls. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, this pandemic has created like educational crisis in the world, because according to Malala Fund research, we are afraid that some 20 million more girls, high school girls, will be out of school when the pandemic subsides. So it's a big challenge, honestly, big challenge. And to cope with this challenge, I think that international community can help, of course. I know that some 24 low-income countries, they are spending on servicing the external debts. More they spend on servicing on the external debts than on education. So there is a gap, like yearly gap of $200 billion to reach to educate girls all over the world. And that gap has increased because of the pandemic. So I will recommend two things. Number one, the donor countries, they should give more to education, and they should cancel debts. And the domestic, I mean, the countries like Nigeria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, they should spend more on education, and they should not cut the funds of education. Like in Nigeria, they have cut for basic universal education, they have cut more than 50% of the universal basic education. So these are the measures that could be taken by the global community to help the poor and developing countries to face the challenge of the COVID pandemic, which is there to the education and girls' education in particular, because we have projects in these different countries, which I mentioned you. And when it comes to online education, then there is a gender gap. Girls have less access to online education than boys. In some societies, communities, even a smartphone is considered as a stigma if it is kept by a girl or if it is used by a girl. And again, when girls don't go to school, they then are involved in home chores to take care of other siblings. Also, they are married off because of the financial, they are thought that they are a burden, and they should, then they marry them off. So these are the reason that because of these disproportionate impact on girls because of the COVID, that girls lag behind in education and access to education than boys. So we have to bridge that gap as well. So, I mean, these are some recommendations that we need to help the developing countries, the low-income countries.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you there. I just, I wish that our government would also agree with what you're saying there. And I know that Celia's just popped in the chat there a little link around being able to kind of add to a petition for our government around some of the cuts to aid that are going ahead.
Thank you for that.
A slightly different question for you this time, Ziauddin. This year, the UK is hosting COP26 at the UN Climate Change Conference. And Malala Fund recently released a report on climate change and girls' education. So can you explain to us a little bit about why climate change is something that activists and teachers should really care about, and particularly when it comes to girls' education?
Yeah, of course, this is very important. And as you mentioned, the COP, like Conference of Parties Climate Conference 26 is coming, and it will, Scotland will host it, I think. I think that, you see, girls' education and climate are very interlinked. When climate catastrophes happen, floods or drought, So the girls are the most vulnerable population. They go out of school. Like according to survey of the or fund, until 2025, because of the climate sufferings, might be 12.5 million girls won't be able to complete their education. So and also in similar way, like on one way, when there are climate catastrophes and climate calamities, girls are more affected by that. But on the other hand, girls' education can help climate change. Right? It can support a healthy climate, a smart climate. And the reason is that when we send girls to school and they achieve education and they remain in school for long, we have less population as well. They are not made early. And of course, I mean, if you simply ask me that most of the men are not aware of this climate crisis. Now, at this time, the climate crisis is led by youth, by children. And we have this amazing young girl from Sweden, Greta Thunberg. She's leading that moment. She's amazing. So if we have more Greta Thunbergs, I hope that we will be able to fight against this climate change. And I believe that I will request the COP26 conference leaders that they should take action. They should take action to include like how to impart quality climate education. I mean, we call it gender equal green earning. So that is so important. So we have expectations that the COP26 will do something, and that is so much important because girls' education and climate, they are so interlinked that this crisis, I mean, most of the people ignore it, but we can help it through girls' education. And I hope that the leaders will take some action.
Thank you very much. So I've got a couple of questions from delegates from the floor, and I think the one that I'm going to start with kind of links into what you've just said there, Ziauddin. So through Malala, you've seen firsthand how powerful young people's voices can be. Do you think that leaders need to listen to young people more? And have you got any suggestions about how young people might be able to better advocate for themselves going forward?
So you see, there's a big change. Like after Malala, when she spoke in Swat for the right of education, at that time, a girl was not supposed, or she was not expected to stand and speak for girls' rights or girls' education at that very young age. Though we have boys and girls in history like Anne Frank and a few others who did raise their voice for human rights. But in that situation, in the Swat Valley, when Taliban they were the de facto rulers of the Swat, and everything was in their control. So speaking for the right of education at that time, while everybody else was almost quiet. So now it's about the climate. I mean, if the world leaders, I'm sorry to say, if they were wise enough and they were brave enough to take this issue seriously, I mean, girls are supposed to be in schools and they are supposed to learn biology, chemistry, and mathematics and computer. But we are so proud of this young generation because education has empowered them so much that they are a different generation. They are mindful of the challenges that our Mother Earth is facing due to climate change. So I will say that the world leaders should take these children very, very serious, because what they are saying it for all of us and for the future of our earth and or climate and everything. So I think that children are knocking at the door of the leaders, and ultimately they have to open it.
I sincerely hope they do.
Yeah.
So thank you. You know, we are slightly running out of time now at the moment. So apologies to delegates who have submitted any questions. We haven't got any time to take any more for the floor. But I've just got one final question for you. What final message would you like to leave our conference with and to our delegates?
I have a few things to say. The most important thing that, like, there are teachers like me who are watching me right now, and I taught for 18 years and I love teaching. I still miss my meeting with the students in the classrooms. I think that it's time that teachers should revisit and re-image the education systems, curriculum. One thing that is traditional, that our classroom, like we build our classroom, we build our life, we build our communities, we build our societies in a classroom. That is one thing. But I will ask teachers that they should look beyond the classroom and the school, because we need to connect education to the challenges they are being faced by our youth and our generation. They can't be taught in isolation. So the most important thing of a teacher is to empower and to inspire children to be able to empower them to face the challenges of tomorrow. So this is very much important, that the teachers should be able to connect classroom with the outer world. Like I will appreciate, and it's very important that for the teacher of today, there are there are many things, but two things are very important. One is gender equality, and number two is climate. Like, we can't imagine of a fair, just, and beautiful world without gender equality. So how we inculcate in our students, in our people, that they should believe in equality, literally believe in equality. And number two is about climate. Because, and now what I'm telling right now, this is so important. So far, for the previous many generations, our teachers taught our children of our ancestors how to exploit the resources of the earth, maximum exploitation. To the extent of to be greedy. How to exploit more and more. How to bring skyscrapers and how to be wealthy. And we taught our children how to exploit the human, like the natural resources of the earth to the maximum. Now, we need a paradigm shift. Now it's time that we sit and we reimagine our education system, where we are able to learn together with our children. To teach them and to learn ourselves as well, how to preserve the climate and how to reserve the resources of the earth for the future generations. How to reduce the greed of more and more, and to be kind to our earth. And this is so much important. This shift is so much important, that we take care not just of the economies, just take care of the family, of individuals, of countries, to be a superpower economically, or to be a weapon power, or to be, no. We are living on this planet. And God forbid, if the planet goes, there is no superpower, no lower power. Everything will be gone. So that shift is so much important, that we have some empathy for everyone all around the world, and we have empathy for our Mother Earth as well. And lastly, I will appreciate that half of the population, girls, education for girls is emancipation. It is not just to learn mathematics or science or languages. No. For me, I know that a girl in Afghanistan, a girl in Pakistan, in India, when she has no access to school, that means that she has not an access to full-fledged life, believe me. So I will request everyone that wherever you are, we should feel for all those girls, 130 million girls who are not in school. And it's very painful for me when I hear that a girl is out of school in some mountains in any part of the world. I wish every girl to be in school, receiving safe, free, and quality education. And teachers are the leaders. I mean, they will lead. Like the teachers must be stakeholders. Teachers are basically leaders with a prophetic wisdom. So this prophetic wisdom is there, and teachers are the leaders, and they will lead this change. And if not now, when? So let's do it. Thank you to everyone.
And thank you ever so much. I honestly, I could talk to you all afternoon. It has been absolutely inspirational. Thank you ever so much for your generosity with your time this afternoon. And thank you for your insightful and inspiring messages that you've given to our conference. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to be able to speak to you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Stay blessed. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, Ziauddin. Such an inspirational session, just wonderful to be a part of. And while you were talking there, Ziauddin, I was put in mind of the first aim set out in our union's rules, which talks about the power of education to enable children not just to understand the world, but to change it for the better. And I think that is right at the heart of the foundation of our union and right at the heart of what we do as educators, as trade unionists. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Colleagues, it has been an absolute privilege to have chaired your conference today. My thanks to all of our speakers, workshop leaders, and to the staff who've worked so hard behind the scenes in order to make this possible. In today's conference, we've been confronted by testimonies that have laid bare the obscene injustices and seismic inequalities that plague our globe. Like you, these stories have stirred in me feelings of frustration and anger about the imbalance in the world. We're now 16 years on from the Make Poverty History campaign, 21 years on from the Millennium Development Goals. It's 32 years since the rights of the child were established, and 63 years since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. With history's long list of commitments and promises, I know that it's sometimes difficult to reconcile the inequality of our times with the belief that things can change. This, as Mary said this morning, has been the unavoidable context of our conference, a world that too often can be ugly and cruel. But today we've also heard stories of courage, of resilience and of hope. We've heard the testimony of Ziauddin, a father whose daughter took on the Taliban and who together turned the gaze of the world to girls' rights to education. We've heard it in the message from David Edwards, who reminded us that there's no stronger force for equity and justice than the world's trade unions. We heard it in the testimony of our own members who are fighting in solidarity with educators and children right across the globe. And we heard it in the message of Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who told our conference, please do not give up, and reminded us that our efforts are now more important than ever. Yes, the scale of the challenges before us is great, but I believe that the strength of our movement is greater still. I believe that as trade unionists and as educators, when we act collectively, we can hold power to account. We can hold governments to their duties to protect human, trade union, and children's rights. On February the 3rd, 2005, Nelson Mandela took to the stage in Trafalgar Square. He was there in support of the Make Poverty History campaign. And in speaking, he said, poverty is not natural. It's man-made and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. I'll just repeat that. It is man-made and can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. When Mandela delivered those words, he spoke not only to the 20,000 campaigners gathered in Trafalgar Square, he spoke to them and to people like you and me. So though the challenges we face are steep, they're not insurmountable. Together in solidarity, with our sisters and brothers around the world, we can overcome the inequalities and injustices that plague our world. We must never underestimate the power of our movement, and we must never underestimate how its strength relies on each one of us playing our part. Conference, our work doesn't culminate today, it's merely renewed. We've got to continue to give ourselves to this struggle. We might not know how long the struggle will last, but we have to keep it going. So let us leave today with a greater preparedness, and let us stand with a greater resolve to bring people together for change. If you're not already an NEU International Solidarity officer, if you're not subscribed to our International Solidarity Bulletin, why not resolve today to do that? The links are in the chat. Affiliate to a campaign, bring international solidarity to your classroom, champion a cause. Conference, as we stare down the barrel of the world's injustices, let us continue to be the movement that transforms inertia into action, fear into hope, and isolation into solidarity. Above all, let us persevere with that same unapologetic vision for a better, fairer world that has guided our movement for generations. Thank you all for the time you've invested in today, and I look forward to continuing our work together. I now declare International Solidarity Conference 2021 officially closed. Thank you.